just like, wow, this record, if it had come out, sorry, Steve, if it had come out back then, you would be a legend.
This is Rock That Doesn't Roll, the story of Christian music. I'm Andrew Gill, a music journalist who grew up listening to Christian rock, and Leah Payne, the author of God Gave Rock and Roll to You, is stuck in traffic. So she is not with me right now for our season 3 finale episode, which is going to be quite a doozy. I think everyone will really enjoy this story, because we have the story of a legendary lost album from the early days of Christian rock and how it soon will be lost no more.
Rock that doesn't roll.
This show is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
No one can see the kingdom of God unless he is born again.
I'm a born-again Christian.
It's not religion, it's a relationship.
Let go and let God.
God loves the sinner, but hates the sin.
They're not just cliches. It's worse than that. Dr. Robert Lipton calls them thought-terminating cliches.
So much has happened since then. I almost can't remember what it felt like to be caught in that moment, pulled into something big and important. A firestorm of prayer. A wind system capable of so much power. I thought I was choosing something extraordinary. I thought this would all turn out differently.
When We Were on Fire, written by Addie Zierman and adapted by Lizzie Goldsmith. Listen to episode 1 at whenwewereonfirepodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
This story was actually brought to me by the two gentlemen who are joining me here today, Charles Normal and Steve Scott. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the email I received was from you, Charles. So how did you suggest yourself as a guest for this show? And what was it that you wanted to tell?
Well, we have, I believe, a mutual friend in a guy named Greg Thornberry.
Oh, yes, the great Dr. Gregory
Dr. Gregory Thornberry.
Allen Thornberry.
Yeah,
yes.
He's great friend. He's been here the last 2 Christmases to stay with me and my family. But anyways, I sent him this album. I said, you might want to hear this, Greg. And I sent him this Steve Scott album. And
actually, first, why don't we tell our audience why you would know Gregory Allen Thornberry? Because
right.
He is known to our audience as the biographer of Larry Norman, the father of Christian rock in some tellings.
Right, and he is was my brother, but still is. And yes. I do go by Charles Normal, but Larry was my brother, and I met Greg, 15 years ago or something, and I knew of his credentials, and I asked, would you be interested in writing, or at least collecting all these papers I have of Larry's and doing something? You can look at them, see if you want to do something. And he said, yeah, absolutely. So he wrote a definitive biography of my brother, which was interesting. And I don't want to keep on talking about Greg, although I love to talk about him.
Well, his, if anyone's not sure, they can go back to the 2 episodes that we ran of our interview with Greg. So,
and I would recommend your audience do that. It's
and I think most people would agree, people who have read his book, that it is a great work of in depth, and he really he had a incredible resource from you in the archives that you gave him access to, and he tells an amazing story of your brother, and so So that's how you guys are friends. So
yeah, we spent a lot of time together when he's doing that. And among the archives was a record I've had since I was 15, I guess. Back in 1980, Larry came up to visit me and my mom and dad in San Jose, California. And as he always did, he, gave me stuff like, check out what I'm working on. But he gave me this cassette, and he said, yeah, this is a solid rock artist. And he gave me this cassette by this guy, Steve Scott. And I listened to the cassette, and it blew my mind. It was like, this is like, no offense, but it didn't sound like Christian music. It sounded like actual, like what you hear on the radio, like secular,
Did you like it better than your brother's music, or did you?
Differently. I mean, you can like the Beatles and the Stones, right? So I liked the Steve Scott record. I loved it, and it was cutting edge. And it was several years later that all these bands, I won't mention their names, but the bands that were like the punk rock Christian bands and new wave Christian bands that came out a few years later. But this stuff was already doing it. Steve Scott's record was doing it. And not to say that it's just punk rock and new wave. It's not. It has elements of that. It has elements of all sorts of things. It was the most fascinating record I heard during that time period. I mean, I liked Led Zeppelin and the Beatles, as everyone my age did, but the Steve Scott record was amazing. So flash forward years later, 2008, when Larry Norman, my brother, is in the throes of dying, he said, Charles, you got to make sure that you put out that Steve Scott record. And I said, like a reissue or what? And he said, no one's ever heard it. You got to put it out. I said, what do you mean no one's ever? It's one of the best records I've ever heard. And he said, no, you got to put it out. I didn't really know the whole story, and I piecemeal put it together with Steve, but this record is fantastic, and I had it in the archives. I had it digitized, and I mixed it, and it's just like, wow, this record, if it had come out, sorry, Steve, if it had come out back then, you would be a legend. So
I heard about the light of progress. I could never see that far. I couldn't find the light of success. Must have had a change of address. I don't care what the people say. There's gotta be a better way. Don't want the usual merchandise recycled in the new skies.
So I want to stop on that point just for a second. The fact that you had a cassette tape of an album that you thought was incredible, but I guess you just assumed, well, it's from this niche sort of Christian, sort of, mainstream artist, and they were just so underground that it's never come up in my all those years from like 1980 to 2008. No one else has ever referenced it.
I didn't think about that. I wasn't really immersed in Christian music, although I was in a Christian band with Larry and toured around. So I know plenty of those guys. I was lucky enough to be, Larry Norman's brother, and he started taking me around the world first time when I was 16 years old, and at Greenbelt Festival and places like that. So I met all these people, and I just knew, okay, cool. This is another whole scene. I was into punk rock. That's a scene. Yeah. This Christian rock music, that's a different scene. There's jazz, that's a different scene. And I loved them all. But I wasn't. I didn't really like compare notes with other Christian music. Like, hey, have you heard Bloodgood's new album or anything like that?
What about that Steve Scott record that I heard in 1980?
Never really came up.
Never came up, yeah.
But I'm super, super stoked that it's coming out, and it's coming out on Kickstarter is how we're going to launch the thing. I'm very excited. You shared them with me, and I share your same opinion that it's high grade stuff, especially when you consider the time period it was made in. And that got me wondering, Steve, like, what was going on that led you to record these albums in 1978? I guess the first question is, how did you meet Larry Norman, who produced these two albums? How did you two first meet?
We met like this. I was at art school in South London I went to a nearby church to see a British guitarist called Gordon Giltrap play. This is early 1970s.
Am I a vessel to be filled with the wine of life and the blood of Jesus spilled? He was crucified for me, and the place was Calvary. A million sins were washed away that day.
I learned that a guy called Randy Stonehill was going to be playing a concert there. So I went back the following night or the following weekend or whenever it was, saw the concert, eventually got to meet Randy through a mutual friend, journalist, poet called Steve Turner.
All over the world, they're opening up, they're coming alive. They're saying, I love you, 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 I love you.
Got Randy to come play a concert at a coffee house at the church where I was attending in Croydon. Played him some songs. He was just staying in a small village, Carshalton, very close to the church where I'd gone to the concert in Purley. We started exchanging songs, talking about songs. He made a cassette recording, and when his friend Larry came over in the early mid-1970s, he played in the cassette and introduced me to Larry, and Larry and I began to talk, and suddenly he began to talk about this brand new thing he had going on called Solid Rock Records. I was an art student on the sort of the crumbling, bleeding edge of all that weirdo avant-garde stuff. So having someone interested in my songs was really interesting, because me as a songwriter was somewhat adjacent, if you like, to me as the aspiring, bleeding edge, crumbling edge, kind of like artsy kind of guy. So there are like two different categories or two different lanes going on for me. So that's how I met Larry. During my final couple of years at art school, as I was completing my education, he got a cassette of songs from his friend Randy, and it started to go from there.
Nice. And this was kind of, I know from the book we talked about that Gregory wrote, that Larry had some time where he kind of befriended Cliff Richard, right? Was this about the same period, or?
It would not surprise me, because my understanding is, and I am very, very not up on those kinds of connections.
Sure.
But Cliff did an album in which he featured some songs, or a couple of songs of Larry's.
I wish we'd all been ready. Two men walking up a hill. One disappears and one's left standing still. I wish we'd all been ready.
Maybe one of Randy's and some other songwriters as well.
I've got news for you. This is not a game. I've got news for you. Are you listening? I've got news for you. We are all the same. And when that is understood, we can start to live again.
Because Cliff Richard was, at that time, the album was called Small Corners, I believe.
Uh-huh.
Cliff Richard was blown away by the quality of the songwriting of Larry and some of the others, and was interested in bringing it to a larger public.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a major star.
Yeah, for your listeners who don't know, Cliff Richard was the Elvis Presley of England. He was huge, and not many people ever heard of him in America. Some people may have. But no, he was huge. Larry was friends with him in 1971. I have video or film of Larry playing acoustic guitar in Cliff's backyard in 1971. So they knew each other for a while.
They were well established as acquaintances by then. But it seemed almost like this was the time you met Larry, and his sort of access to high quality studios and ability to put together really good recording sessions may have dovetailed a little bit, right?
Well, what actually dovetailed was Larry was in London at Air Studios. When I first met him, he was making a record for his label, the label that he was signed to at that point.
Okay, so he's like just dropped by Air Studios, like the top tier studio you could think of in England, right? Like George Martin's.
It was all science fiction to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a scruffy art student.
Right. Yeah. So the juxtaposition of you dropping into this place must have been something.
It was surreal, and to have this guy say, "Oh, yeah, I like your songs, and maybe eventually we could do something with your songs," I'm just going, well, yes, let's do that.
Because it's not like you didn't have other career paths for music laid out in front of you. It was just great, Larry likes it, let's go.
I was a starving artist. I was getting ready to become a starving artist. I was interested in experimental film, the kind where they paint directly onto the film stock and scratch the cells or create endless loops of things. I was getting an education in sort of experimental avant-garde stuff, and I wasn't a particularly good artist. We need to make that quite clear. I wasn't looking at a promising career as a painter or a conceptual artist or an aspiring underground filmmaker. So when this possibility swung in and said, "Hey, why don't we make a record?" I thought, good grief, yes, it's the answer to all my problems. Let's do that. That kind of thing.
Just to create tension for the listeners, I'm going to mention something that we'll come back to later. But Greg Thornberry wrote a little something about these albums for the Kickstarter, and the thing he begins with is that you wrote Larry a 5-page letter begging him never to release these albums. So I'm just going to put that out there and put a pin in it for the listeners to know that at some point you decided these should never come out, and yet now we do want them coming out.
Rock that doesn't roll.
Hey, Rock That Doesn't Roll listeners. We just want to give you an update on our Patreon support. We have been very heartened to see new people signing up almost every week to help bring this podcast to you. And we could not appreciate it more.
Yeah, so for those of you who may or may not know, this is a work of love. This is a project that comes from the heart. And so we rely on funds from dedicated listeners like you all. Thank you so much to the people who've already decided to give. It's actually, I don't know, it warms my heart. I don't know how you feel about it. Andrew, you were raised Methodist. Is your heart strangely warmed by?
Yeah, just call me John Wesley over here. Yeah. No, it is the thing that, is required to make the show. We are still not really paying ourselves a fair wage, but we are offsetting some of the lost potential earning time that we put into this podcast. Yeah. So if you do want the show to continue existing, we do need listeners to support us. And, if that's not financially, you can tell people about us. You could share us on social media, do all other things. But we would love this to be something we can dedicate a lot of time to. But we have to provide for our families, and we do not each have trust funds. I don't have a trust fund. You don't have a trust fund, do you, Leah?
No,
just
no,
checking. Yeah,
sad to say. Yeah.
So yeah, we appreciate all the support.
Thank you so much, everyone.
And I've never asked you about this, Steve, but you're talking about this juxtaposition going from being an avant-garde artist to ending up at George Martin's Air Studios in London. I'm more interested in how you ended up, from there, you end up in Hollywood, on Hollywood Boulevard in the 70s. It's crazy. To me, it evokes Cheech and Chong movies and just like the whole weird thing that was going on in Hollywood. I don't know if you saw that Tarantino movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but I saw that and I'm like, yep, I was there. Not that early, but in like 74, 75, going down to visit Larry for the summer. Yeah, it was a gritty, grimy place. Hollywood Boulevard was not what you thought about. That's entertainment, the movies, and it wasn't like that. It was filthy. There were winos all over the street and heroin dealers. And so what was that like for you to go from London? Yeah, you went to Air Studios, but then you end up in Hollywood. Where did you live, and what did you think of that weird place?
Well, I ended up in Hollywood. I think the studios was Mama Joe's, I think.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I think.
It was. I think it was the Sound House.
Yeah,
and Mama
I'd
Joe's,
gone
maybe.
from art school, and I'd gone from. Here's a kind of. I remember sitting Larry. This is a story that is kind of somewhat ambiently related to all this. I remember sitting Larry down in 1975 or 6 or something and saying, Larry, you've got to hear this. I played Larry an album that I was very impressed by to see what he thought of it. And it was an album by a British composer called Gavin Bryars. And the album was called Jesus' Blood Never Failed Me Yet.
I was wondering if you had a connection to him. I was researching that just this morning, actually.
Yeah, well, that whole way of working with sound, loops, stuff like that, I was really impressed by.
Jesus' blood never found me yet, never found me yet. Blood never found me yet. This one thing I know, for he loved me so. Jesus' blood never found.
So the world of Jesus rock, even Bleeding Edge Jesus rock, was only like 2 lanes over from whatever it was I was becoming a very bad artist in. Does that make sense? So I, one part of my head was like interested in, had aspirations and pretensions towards the avant-garde. Another part of my head said, oh, healthy, yes. Recording songs in California, I think I'll do that. Because my past was cloudy, my future was uncertain, and this seems to be providentially the way to go. I thought these songs, recording these songs, making this record, working with Larry and Mark Hurd and Tom Howard and those guys, all seemed to be like a step forward. And I thought, if there is any way at all of this becoming sustainable, then I can do this to sustain myself, and I can go to poetry readings and experimental film screenings and gallery openings and things like that when I'm not doing this. I mean, that was something of the Grand Master Plan, which is really not very grand mastery or plan-ish. But it really seemed providentially appropriate that I end up on Hollywood Boulevard at Grauman's Chinese Theater queuing for the premiere of Star Wars, which is what happened because I was a new guy on the block and I drew the short straw. It reminded me a little bit of parts of London. There were decaying movie theaters, Scientologists. You'd be tripping over people. It was, and this was where Larry and different people, including Philip Mangano, had like the street level offices, and then Larry, the other Larry, the record label, Solid Rock they'd be cutting tracks in Mama Joe's, which was not that far from there. So it's a little bit of a culture shock, but not hugely. I was just amazed by it all. I was just going, this is astonishing. Who knew that this could be happening? Let's do this. That was my thinking.
I don't know if you remember this, Steve, or anybody. I don't think anybody's ever heard this, but Larry was at 7046 Hollywood Boulevard. That's where the Solid Rock offices were, on 2 floors in that building. But to enter the building, you had to walk through this little kind of alcove where you didn't have to walk through it, but right next to the Hollywood Love Boutique and Sex Museum, it was a porn store. Yes. So it was like, okay, here's the seat of Christian rock, what's happening right now, but you have to walk through a porn store to get there, which is kind of maybe a pretty decent metaphor.
Yeah, I remember that place. Yeah. I remember that being like right there. I was just going.
Yeah.
The love you need is knocking at your door. Who could ask for more than the love you need? The love you need.
But Steve, so you weren't like gigging and playing these songs out before this, or were you these were just songs you were writing privately?
I was periodically I'd go to folk clubs. I wasn't singing in folk clubs that much. I'd try and play acoustic instrumental guitar. I just started writing songs. I started writing songs in 1972. I was in France with a parachurch missionary organization. I was in the south of France, Avignon, Carpentras, that area. Borrowed a guitar, strung it so I could play it left-handed, and I found myself playing around with these really weird, melancholy minor chords. And then these words, very simple words, began to come to me, as it were, and I wrote my first song in the summer of 1972 in the south of France. That song was called Farthest Star. That song, then I began to write others, and they were the ones that I played for Randy Stonehill, who in turn took a cassette of them to his friend, Larry Norman.
Yeah, so then you recorded in Hollywood? You came to Hollywood to record? And,
yes. Yeah,
and how long did these sessions take? What did it feel like? It was your first time in like being the center performer for a studio project?
Yes. So it was, I can't remember, I don't know what it felt. Terrifying is a good word, I think, for it. I'd written these songs, hearing these songs constructed with electric instruments and string arrangements from Tom Howard and vocal overdubs from Mark Hurd and things. I was amazed to hear these songs start to come to life in this form. All I'd known up until then was just me and an acoustic guitar, into a cassette player.
And in the studio, was Larry kind of like running things? Like Larry was saying, you do this, you do that?
Larry was the producer, and he definitely pulled things out of the songs and added layers and depth to the songs that I didn't know were there. There'd be times, because Larry was, busy as well, where he'd have someone like Mark Hurd step in and to kind of take over, kind of merge engineering and producing kind of thing. But I think in these songs you can hear a lot of what And I've only just thought of this. I've only just now thought of this. But I think if you listen to these songs, you're hearing a lot of what Larry heard in his head when he listened to the voice and guitar cassette. Okay, so there's that. And further augmented and supplemented by the work that Charles has done on the tracks digitally since that time. And I think what Charles has done is both faithful to where we are today, but is also resonant with your brother's vision.
Yeah, I didn't add anything really. I just, I had the album, both of the albums. In case people don't know, there's actually 2 albums coming out. I had these on cassette when I was a kid, and it wasn't until I pulled out the multi-tracks, the 24-track tapes, and I set up a studio in Oslo, and that was one of the first projects I started working on, that I would listen and I would discover new things that weren't on those initial rough mix cassettes. I'd push up one channel and be like, what is this? This is like a full string section. And what is going on here? What's happening here? This is even better than I ever thought this record was. So, I didn't really add much to it. I did spend a lot of time mixing it because I wanted it to sound as good as possible. But most of the elements were there.
Then my previous remarks expanded to include the mixing capacity, as well as the other forms of augmentation.
Was it more laborious to record than you imagined it would be? Like I could if you're recording a full string section and then you don't even use it in the mix that you got, it could maybe be frustrating if it was your first time going through that process. Or were you just so excited?
I'm trying to think back. I mean, it was the studio. We tended to work at night. So you start like 10 or 11 at night and go through to like 5 or 6 the next morning. There were a few, I think there might have been a few daytime sessions because Tom Howard, if he was bringing people in to play stuff, then they're not all like lunatics. So they got lives, So it wasn't frustrating because I was I was hearing these songs being brought to life, and I'm just going, I don't believe what's happening. Oh, we just spent 4 hours, getting a drum sound or something, but oh well, kind of thing.
Charles, what's one of the songs that had the strings or something that you changed the mix a lot on that I could drop in right here?
First of all, there was no mix ever. It was just board tapes, they're called. It's just like, let's capture what we recorded today. And he gave me those when I was a kid. I'd never heard the album. I loved it, but I had never really heard it. There's no string sections on this, but how about you play Stranger, which is phenomenal. Steve playing guitar, and then Larry and Tom, everyone doing different things on it. And it's just great. It's actually the Solid Rock roster's greatest hits. It's Randy Stonehill, Larry Norman, Mark Hurd, Tom Howard. It's all those guys that did their own separate records coming together in the studio and working with Steve Scott to make something that's amazing. You can hear a little bit. So Stranger is a good song.
There are 2 roads in this life. One is narrow, one is wide. Take if I'm to reach the other side. I love the Lord, and He's coming back one day. Stranger, won't you change your sinful ways? Stranger, you can laugh. Stranger, scorn, but I bet you won't be
what did you think might happen when you finished these sessions, Steve? Like, what was your next? You were like, okay, we've got these songs together. They sound amazing. This was a great experience in the studio. What did you think would happen next?
What I was hoping was going to happen next was that the album would be finished, that Larry, who was he? Was he with Word at that point?
Yes, Word.
Was Solid Rock distributed by Word? He'd play it for the Word executives. They'd be ecstatic. And they'd say, oh, we really have to get behind this guy and promote it and get him out there and, do all those kinds of things that are involved in making a record successful to the extent that it helps the artist be sustainable or have the artist have his vocation, he can buy groceries or whatever. Yeah. I just thought, the record comes out, people like it, hopefully. People like the songs. And I didn't have, this may be irrelevant, but I didn't have very, very much exposure to Jesus rock, CCM, proto-CCM type stuff. I just thought, I like these songs. I really feel the content, the emotional content of these songs. I want them to come out. I want the record to come out. I want it to find the people it's meant to find in a way that keeps my head above water. And that's what I want to happen.
Yeah, I was looking, so these were recorded in 1978, and I was looking up what are other albums that came out in 1978, right? And how would this album could have been in conversation with, let's see, Some Girls by the Rolling Stones, The Cars, Parallel Lines by Blondie.
There you go.
All of these, this is the class that this album was recorded in the midst of, right? Elvis Costello, This Year's Model.
That's true, but also don't forget about more acoustic songwriting stuff that was going on.
Of course.
And no insult to Steve, but like maybe a little bit of Eagles, so it's not just like new wave and punk rock, it's also
right.
Americana, what's happening in America, which makes sense for an English guy where all the punk stuff was happening, moves to America, and there's all this. And in California, it's all, hey, man, it's 1979, 78, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and the Eagles were huge at that time. And, I'm just imagining like the execs at Word Records, like this is kind of one of the moments where you realize that maybe some of the Christian music execs might not be as up on music as the artists are, because it seemed like they couldn't see the context that it would exist in, or I don't know.
That's absolutely true. Any artist who's spent their whole life doing art, and I've done that. I've been signed to major labels who just end up not getting behind the record. It's so every artist has an idea. I'm going to write some songs, and then some record guy will go, "Hey, that's cool," and I'm going to put a bunch of money behind you. Next thing you know, you'll be playing at Madison Square Gardens. We think that's how it works. It doesn't work like that. In Word Records' case, everyone who works at a record company, they could be selling shoes or whatever. They're salespeople. Oh, there's money in this and kids like this stuff. Well, Steve's record didn't sound like anything else that was on the CCM charts back then. There was the Archers and there was, Amy Grant or what, I don't know if that's before her time, but
no, I think her
it's like it's stuff
at that same time. Yeah.
No, I'm not commenting on other artists, but Steve Scott didn't sound like the other artists, and that's what record company executives want. That has been successful, so let's take this other record that Larry's going to give us, and oh wait, it doesn't sound the same. It's not praise Jesus stuff. It's like actually got conflict, and it's got things. I know Steve thinks I'm stuck on this, but I think the greatest catchphrase from the album is epistemology is not ontology. It's like, yeah, if you're listening to the Archers, you're not going to care,
I think to supplement what Charles is saying, yeah, I was really naive in thinking that it was all very linear. The dots were there and it would join up and things like that. And so, in the overall even in the ecology of solid rock under the wings of word, I don't quite know what was going on in terms of sales and things like that. It may well, I mean, the feeling I get, and I got it from reading in Greg's book, is that the executives could quite rightly stand back and say, well, there's a bigger picture here. You know, this, you give us this, is it okay? You give us this, maybe not so much. You give us this, what's this? This English guy? No, I don't think so. We need to concentrate on what you or whatever. You know, I think people just step back and just say, well, we're not. It's going to take. You know, I don't know what's involved in making something like this work. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So whereas I had a somewhat linear, desperate, hopeful, naive view of things, there were many cogs and streams working providentially through the thinking of executives, record labels, and things like that, which is why I think the Moving Pictures project did not come to the surface until now.
To put it lightly. Yeah. So Steve makes a record when everybody's singing, you know, worship songs or whatever. And Steve has this album that takes place in a bar. It's called Come Back Soon, where he's talking about like, hey, come on, Jesus, you said you were going to come back before anyone in his crowd perished. But it's been 2,000 years. And he says, some of us were wondering just where the hell you are. It's like, this is not CCM music.
Right.
Come back soon. Nobody really seems to miss you. Some of us are talking about the Third World War. Some of us are saving for that second car. Sometimes when we're by ourselves, we're wondering just where the hell you are.
But all these years later, it's like, wow, this is way better than anything disposable that was happening then. This is actually still a concern.
Yeah, and so in 78, Word says, no, we're not going to release this. And I guess, I don't know, I guess Larry wasn't able to override that. I know it gets sticky with all the solid rock record stuff based on reading Greg's book, but
yeah,
it's there were all kinds of reasons for business troubles and that era, but you know, Word not being excited about the album probably just put a stop to it right then.
Yeah.
But then, it goes years, and then eventually you put out an album in 83 with a different label.
Mm-hmm.
How long did it take you to like give up hope on getting this record out there and move on to something new? Or
what happened was this. I mean, what happened was this. There was all kinds of unraveling going on around the solid rock scenario. We were 2 or 3 years in to working on my particular project. No one had come to me and said, the record label doesn't, my distributor does not want this project. I mean, I never had that conversation. I just had, more and more delay, and I was getting more and more worried. What I thought was meant to be pretty straightforward, and I was getting confused, sad, wondering what the heck I was doing. I'd burned my boats behind me, and here I am in a strange land with an unfinished record and a bunch of other people having their own issues and questions. around the record label. So here's what I did. I had a conversation with Larry, and I said, Larry, if we don't get this resolved in like 6 months, I'm going to walk away, which is essentially what I did. What happened from there was via Randy Stonehill, I'd been introduced to this church in Northern California that expressed an interest in the arts. And I went up there for a Randy Stonehill concert. I went up there again for a creative writing workshop weekend that featured a bunch of people from Berkeley. And this church was Warehouse Christian Ministries, pastored by...
In Sacramento, right?
Yes, yeah, Lewis and Mary Neely. And we just began to talk about the idea, because everything seemed so uncertain in the South. Whatever my vision was for my role in the South, I thought, who knows what's going to happen? So I moved north, and I got involved with Warehouse Christian Ministries, flying down once in a while to work on this project up until the time that I actually said, I'm done. I can't live with this kind of uncertainty. So that's what happened. And then this church, Warehouse Christian Ministries in Northern California, formed a sort of an arts component initially called Songray Productions, and then they kind of morphed into a record label called Exit Records. But prior to that, they were doing things like theater, they had a gallery, visual arts, poetry, dance, all sorts of things. Plus, as I said, we were adjacent to Berkeley, so I was making a whole bunch of new friends down in the Bay Area.
When you were with Exit Records, I noticed Charlie Peacock was a label mate. Were you interacting with Charlie in the Sacramento area?
Charlie, the 77s and Vector and Charlie were the studio situation. Very much, somewhat like the Solid Rock situation, is that everybody helps everybody else out on their projects. So there might be Charlie Peacock keyboards or arrangements or what have you on some of the stuff that we produced. Or the 77s functioning as a backing band for a couple of tracks on one of my projects. So the thing about the 77, they were originally called the Scratch Band, and they were just getting going in writing original material. So one of the interim stopgap measures was that they did covers of stuff off moving pictures for their live gigs until such a time as they started to build up their own catalog and stuff like that. Although they did cover a different kind of light on their first album.
I heard about the light of progress. I could never see that far. Couldn't find the light of success. Must have had a change of address. I don't care what the people say.
So that was that.
Did they have the same tape that Charles had, or did they?
Yeah, I'm wondering that too. How did they hear your stuff?
Yeah.
I probably had a cassette copy of something, of like rough mixes or day mixes or something.
Possibly the same tape. Yeah.
I don't know if it was the same. I don't know if it was the same tape. I remember once Larry gave me a tape, said, "Here's the latest mix of your album." And of course it wasn't. One side was Peter Gabriel in German. It was a German edition of Peter Gabriel's Melting Face album. And the other side, Steve Scott Moving Pictures. It was blank. There was nothing.
Okay, let me interject here for a second. This is part of the Larry Norman legend. Larry was in an airplane crash, and it wasn't the plane didn't crash, but what happened is the airplane came down on the tarmac really hard, and the entire ceiling panel fell on Larry's head. And he had some problems after that. He was disoriented for months, and he was later diagnosed with, one doctor said he had bipolar, they didn't really know, which has become a common theme in my family. Doctors don't really know what happened. But Larry didn't lose his ability to, spot talent, if you will, or to write songs, but he lost the ability to continue and do the final step. It was like a block in his brain. That was 1978. This coincided with with what happened with Steve Scott's record, and I'm sorry that Steve became a victim of it. I've been a victim of it too. I've been signed to major labels and up and coming bands. I had a band called Jet Boy in the 80s on the Sunset Strip in Hollywood, and we got signed. It's a long story, but we got signed to MCA Records, and you guys are going to be the next big thing. And we were best friends with Guns N' Roses right when they were coming up. And so, okay, this is very interesting. Guns N' Roses took off, became global superstars, and the record company looks at us and like, you guys are next. You're the spearhead of this whole movement. And they put us out on the road, and the album had not even come out. They put out a single, which was doing well on American radio. And then we get a call. We're in Texas, and our road manager gets a call. Come back to Hollywood. We're like, yeah, but we got 3 more months of touring. They said, come back to Hollywood. So we came back, and our manager took us out to some restaurant in Beverly Hills and said, the label has decided they're not going to promote this album anymore, and they're not going to pick up the options. And we don't know what that means. We're like, okay, so they want us to do another record? And they said, no, they're not going to promote this anymore, and they're not going to pick up the option. And we still don't know what that means because we're musicians. We like to write songs. We don't understand garbled contract talk. What it means is the record company is dropping you. Well, you could have said that, but they didn't say that. Well, they're going to not pick up the option. And we didn't know why the album never came out and why we never became a huge success. And a few weeks, a couple months later, I just ended up telling the guys in the band, like, "Hey, man, I'm out," and I moved to New Orleans instead. So I really identify Steve, like, "Oh, you're from England, you moved to Hollywood, and you're like, wow, all these like talented guys, and I'm making this record, and I'm living on Hollywood Boulevard. This is crazy. I'm going to Grauman's Chinese and picking up tickets for Star Wars, and then what's happening?" And there's no answers, really, because no one really knows how to articulate what's happening either. What it was a record company, Word Records, based in Texas, is like, yeah, we don't want that one. Next.
Exactly.
While
right.
people have invested their hopes and ideas, songwriting skills, and their dreams of what could possibly happen, but it's some executive is just like, yeah, I don't hear it. Next. And that's happened to me so many times on secular major labels. It's
and meanwhile, Larry is incapacitated in some way by this injury, and so he's not able to full-throatedly, push back on the the fast.
No, not at all. Yeah. What Larry did next? Sorry to turn over to Larry again, but so after the Steve Scott thing, Larry's next album, which is considered by many a classic, was an album called Something New Under the Sun, which is really just raw. It's not produced because Larry he lost that component in his thinking, how to make it polished and really slick, and puts out this record, which is kind of a middle finger.
Nobody trusts me. They blame me for the fires in town. Claim that hell is where I'm bound and pray that God will feed me. Hard luck and bad news. Hard luck and bad news. If you were in my shoes, you'd die.
It's like really not it's a Christian record if you're going to be real, if you're a real Christian. But if you just like happy, shiny stuff, that album is not going to work. It's raw, and it's so, yeah, Steve got caught in the crosshairs. That's really a bummer.
Yeah.
Rock that that doesn't roll. Doesn't roll.
So you put out the album in 83 with Exit, and then this is where the timeline picks up the letter that Gregory Thornbury references in the write-up, is that you sent Larry a letter saying, never release this album. And so what was that about?
At the time that I kind of like drifted away from the Hollywood thing, certainly not understanding all the circumstances behind why stuff happened or didn't happen. My thinking was, there were a lot of complicated things going on down there in the South. I just thought, I want to be as far away from whatever's happening there as possible. There were many factors I did not understand. But I did not want to make any contribution whatsoever to whatever, how can I put this? Whatever mythology was evolving down there. I mean, like with the emergence of some myths, there is no such thing as bad publicity. And I thought, I simply do not want to contribute to a legend. This is, keep in mind, this is Steve Scott in 1983. Looking back on his experience recording moving pictures, and now going back into the studio to record Love in the Western World, were songs written very, very quickly. And it was, I'm not going to say it was like an anti-moving pictures album, but the song priorities, structures, and shapes were different to this. The moving pictures album, Charles has described eloquently some of what's on there, but when there's acoustic guitar and strings, kind of like it leans towards like a Baroque folk pop.
Sure.
And then it would kind of try and get a bit rocky and edgy here and there, or attempt reggae or something. You got that. That was one kind of good. By the time I got to quoting a French-Swiss theologian named Denis de Rougemont, who wrote a book called Love in the Western World, I moved on in my aspirations and thinking in terms of song structure. I was a little bit more integrated in terms of what I wanted, the weird art side of my brain and the weird singer-songwriter side of my brain were a little bit closer together now. So I wanted to do stuff that was a bit more sort of meta.
The line is always busy and the writing's on the wall. I'm no good at names of places, so don't get me in a fight. I saw you going through your paces in the darkness and the light. Do I need you for my mother, or do I just want you for tonight? You'll have to bill me later, I just got to get it right. The song is new, the story's old, where girl meets boy.
A bit more conscious of the form that I was making use of. So I did Love in the Western World, I wrote those songs. I was listening to different people, I was getting influenced by different people musically.
Yeah.
Steve, were you a poet before you started writing songs?
Yes.
Yes. So
yeah, I was doing spoken word. I was doing spoken word gigs. In fact, I'd gotten on a couple of occasions. I'd been invited to open with poems for a band out of England called the Third Ear Band, who were an instrumental, drony, cello, violin, viola, and oboe and hand drum. They're a very trancey, raga-esque kind of music band. I got to read poetry with them on a couple of occasions. And also at places like the Arts Lab in Drury Lane, where a lot of experimental underground art went on. Also at my college, when I was an undergrad student. And I was publishing, and when I left art school, one of my final projects was a 16mm film called Ghost Dance, and a collage poem also called Ghost Dance in booklet form. And it was basically a collage of texts from manuals on film projectors and cinema, plus sections of prose about Wovoka and the Red Indian ghost dance religion. And I was juxtaposing these two sets of information in a book that was published by a small press in England called Monolith Books in an edition of 100. And Larry bought 25 copies and brought them with him back to the States. And I never knew what happened to those books until at least one of them, till I'm back in England in 1983 for a few months, and I suddenly get this letter from America. It's a poet writing to me from America, requesting permission to photocopy the book Ghost Dance, which is being held in the rare books section of a nearby university, and explicitly bore the legend not to be reproduced in any form without express permission from. So I'm getting this letter, a zillion years after the fact, that one of the books that Larry bought ended up in the rare books section of a library, and here's this American poet wanted to write to me and get permission to reproduce it. What was the question?
well, speaking of a zillion years later, here we are in 2025, and when was the moment, if you can look back, when you thought, boy, I wish moving pictures had actually been released, and I feel differently now? When was that for you?
It was the conversations between myself, Charles, and someone who's no longer with us, Randy Layton of Alternative Records, who'd put out some Steve Scott stuff back in the 90s. But I think Charles was the main driver. He said, look, I got these tapes. Randy expressed some interest at some point, but then Charles took it back and was working on the project, took it back to Oslo, digitized the material, and began... At first, I was kind of reluctant. And the very, very, very first, I was going to think...
Oh, really? I couldn't tell.
I was thinking, what? But the more I thought about it... Well, two things. One is the more I thought about it. Two is listening to what Charles was doing with the tracks. I just thought, oh my gosh, this stuff sounds halfway decent. And it's great to hear the old songs. It's great to hear the songs again. And the more Charles and I began to talk about it, the more enthusiastic I became about the idea of the project coming out in 2025, 2026, or whatever. I had always perennially fielded these emails, these queries from people saying, whatever happened to the Larry Norman album you recorded? Or, I've got Love in the Western World. I understand you recorded a record before, all those kinds of things. And I'd say, well, myth and legend, who knows what will come of all that. But when Charles began to talk seriously, from 2008, 2009 on is when the conversations in a seedling sense began, because I got intelligence from someone who was at Larry's funeral, And they said that they'd heard the story that one of the last things that Larry had talked about was getting that project out. So when I heard that, and then I'm having the very, very beginning conversations around whatever might make that possible. Then a few years deeper in, we're actually listening to tracks, mixes, augmentations, and I'm going, yeah, definitely. I mean, and now, 2025, 2026, these songs are between 48 and 55 years old. And they sound good now.
You know, I'm going to interject here for a second, Steve. I'm sorry I've been so lackadaisical about doing this, but I did contact you, I suppose, after Larry died in 2008. That's a lifetime ago for a lot of people. And I didn't actually transfer. That's a very strange process. I've got 24 track tapes on Ampex 456 tapes recorded in 1978 to like 1980, I guess.
Oh, did you have to bake them?
I had to bake them. I had to buy a convection oven. Back home when I was still living in Salem, Oregon, I baked them at low temperature, I can't remember, 110 degrees for like 8 to 12 hours, and then go to a recording studio and buy hours at the recording studio. The tapes luckily worked. They weren't they were unusable before that. They were shedding and stuff, but I baked them, which re-adhered. Long process. If anybody is interested in hearing about baking tapes, look it up. It's chemistry. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's wild. I've had to do it at the radio station. Or I haven't done it myself, but we've had it done to old archival tapes. Yeah,
I baked the tapes in 2018. But I transferred them to digital at a studio in Portland. And then I was just then moving to Oslo, Norway from Portland, Oregon. And so I didn't listen to the tapes. But I have the digital. They're not going to decay, we hope. And I then moved to Oslo, Norway. And it took me a while to settle in and to find a studio and rent the studio and set it up, and months go by and then a couple of years go by, and I finally pull out these digital tapes and I'm like, oh yeah. The first one I mixed was The Raft Is Not the Shore. It's one of Steve's, one of my favorites from those days. And I put it on, and that's when I pulled up stuff. I was like, oh, there's weird like dub ideas, like stuff that I hadn't heard until a few years after the initial recordings. Like, oh, that's pretty hip. That's kind of cool. And then I was like, I want to contact Steve. And I think I sent him 1 or 2 songs like, hey, I mixed this and it sounds really good. Anyways, that's 2018. So 2025, all these years later now, the record is done because I've done it kind of sporadically. And I've sent it off to people who I regard as people who know what they're talking about. I sent off tapes to like Warren Zanes, who just did a movie on Bruce Springsteen, that Springsteen movie that just came out. Yeah. Warren Zanes is the creative director, I guess, of that. He wrote the book that the movie is based on. So these are heavy hitter guys, and I sent it out like, dude, I think this stuff is great, but what do you think? And they universally came back like, oh my gosh, this stuff is amazing, dude. What happened to this record? Why, And so, Thornberry was one of them, Greg Thornberry, and Warren Zanes, a lot of people. And I played it to people like, I've told you, I played it to guys from Dandy Warhols and other bands. I know a lot of rock star dudes, and, I was like, hey, what do you think of this? They're like, this is off the hook, bro. This has got to come out. So that gave me a little last minute encouragement. And it took a while to get Steve Scott himself on board, but I think I've almost pushed him over the precipice now.
Since we mentioned 77s earlier, and I know, Steve, you worked with Mike Rowe on a number of your later albums. There's a story that I often hear in these like Christian music nerd worlds where people say, if only U2 hadn't gotten all the promotional focus from Island Records, then the 77s might have, broken through and had a major hit. What's a what if, like a counterfactual that we can say about if this album had come out in 1978, what might have happened? Can anyone think of?
Oh, I've thought about it a lot. I think that.
What do you think?
I think the course of Christian music would have changed. Going out on a limb here, I don't understand the Daniel Amos album, Horrendous Disc, pushed as a new wave record and cutting edge. It's not, as far as I can tell. I could look at the pictures and say, well, they've all got beards. It's not very new wave, and it's okay. Nothing against those guys, but they became the guys that this is the cutting edge stuff. I'm like, no, it's not. The Steve Scott record was miles ahead of that. Not to debase anybody. I don't know what would have changed, but I think that Steve Scott, like many bands, like I mentioned before, you're just about to make it, but some guy in a suit is like, I don't hear it, next.
Yeah.
So you never know what course music is going to take,
Yeah. Well, are you guys looking at? First you want to complete the Kickstarter, get the release fully funded. Are there any other event possibilities on the horizon? Maybe there is a new museum in Nashville, so maybe you guys could set up an event there or something, at some point once the album's out.
Sure. I just want the world to hear this record because it's not just a Christian record of that era. It stands on its own legs now. It's like, wow, it's as if like a Warren Zevon album came out now. Like, this is better than Taylor Swift or anything that's on the radio.
Yeah.
I'm reasonably enthusiastic about appearing at a museum.
Yeah.
You're describing and things because I am very interested in this record being heard by as many people as is appropriate for a couple of reasons. One is, maybe three. One is the songs still have work to do in the ears and the imaginations of listeners. I don't know, there might be someone in 25, 26 who hears one of these songs for the first time and it says something to them, and that has to be important. Two is, quite transparently, we've mentioned like Love in the Western World. Someone else is going to go, oh, you mean like that spoken word project, the Butterfly Effect, or that weird spoken word project based on the life and the writings of Lilias Trotter called The Way of the Sevenfold Secret. I want everything. It's going to sound really crass. Everything potentially sells everything else. Just creating. If you like this, then it's pop. If you like what's happening on moving pictures, maybe you can stretch to Love in the Western World. If you like the whale poem, maybe you can stretch to the other spoken word stuff. If you like the spoken word stuff, maybe you can listen to what he did with this, based on this 1926 book by a missionary.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. So my art damage thinking and my looking back over my career, as it were, has come together. And of course the third thing is we need a Willie Nelson cover of Farthest Star.
We got to get in there quick. Yeah.
What I envision, Steve, is that people aren't going to, go off tangentially from hearing moving pictures and the other companion album, Close Ups, which is just as good. They're not going to be like, oh, I need to check out his other stuff. I believe they're going to think, wow, why? First of all, why were we deprived of this for so long? But this is really a classic album. It sums up what a lot of people were thinking in Christian rock in the 70s, and even more so now. These are concerns that are going to resonate with people, like the word record executive thought. This is not going to resonate with the people. It does now. We live in a crazy time. Your album is crazy and genius, and I'm hoping that's what people get out of it. Just like, how did I miss that? Well, the story's there. I know how I missed it, but I'm really glad it's coming out. And we're doing this Kickstarter campaign. I guess if the listeners go to Kickstarter and look up Steve Scott double album,
yeah,
they'll find
it. We'll put a link in the show notes here too. So
yeah.
Just open the show notes here and you'll get straight to the Kickstarter. So,
I've made many albums in my life, and I didn't make this one. I'm more excited about this than one of my own personal releases. So there's my input.
It's good. I think Charles's input is good and quite sobering. It's true. I think the value of this project coming out now is that it speaks to now. Providentially, that's how these things worked out. I'm now 50 years on from some of these songs, and I can look back and I'm going, yeah, put them out. Because why the heck not? It's great. It's a great project. People worked hard on this. People poured resources into this. Maybe someone will get something out of it now. Maybe Dolly Parton will cover one of the songs. Maybe, just maybe, someone will say, well, what else has this weirdo done? And whether or not the project has its own validity, whether or not it leads to a wider exposure for the other projects, moving pictures / close-ups has its own intrinsic validity and its own specific relevance to the situation we find ourselves in today. And providentially, that's how it lined up. Providentially, someone said 50 years ago, no, you are not going to be a Jesus rock star appearing on Christian Music Night at Disneyland in the late 1970s. You are going to go do this and go do this and go to Bali and go do this and teach about the arts and things like that, work in this situation, and then when it's right, the record will come out. And when it does come out, you'll be sufficiently moved on from it not to take it so seriously but to take it seriously enough to allow the project to breathe in the space it's been dropped into.
Yeah, because I was just going to say for listeners that a lot of Steve's later work has involved, sound collage, field recording, spoken word, poetry.
Mm-hmm.
So not quite as an easy of an on-ramp as a late 70s rock album, right? So
no, this is a rock album. It's a classic rock album.
Yeah, exactly.
In my estimation. And yeah, I just hope people hear it. And that was Larry's, basically last wishes to me. Make sure that people hear this. Make sure it gets out there. And I feel like the time now, with what's going on politically and sociologically in America, it's like this album needs to be dropped right now. And I think it's fantastic.
So what is a song that I should play to close out the interview? Like, what would choose one of the songs on the two albums, and we'll just play that as the end of the episode.
Well, that's not up to me. That's up to Steve as the artist.
Okay.
But, yeah, no, I would say Permanent Revolution, because we look what's happening on with ICE and all this kind of stuff.
Your choices are Permanent Revolution or King for the Day.
King for the Day or A Chapel of Stone. I mean, they're all super relevant.
Stone. There you go. Chapel of Stone. Chapel of Stone is a really interesting song, and I went back and listened to this version of Chapel of Stone. And I thought, such a sad song, but it's so.
Yeah, it's not a rocker. You're going to have to put on your thinking cap and listen to this, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's Chapel of Stone for me was between. I was thinking about this morning. I was thinking about the song Chapel of Stone. because the songwriters I was listening to back in the early to mid 1970s was the Tim Buckleys, the Leonard Cohens, occasionally the David Ackles, who I later learned was a believer and writing from a Christian perspective. And Chapel of Stone is somewhere, somewhat remotely, but it's adjacent to David Ackles' song called His Name is Andrew. And then I was thinking, 5 years after I recorded Chapel of Stone, I was in Cambridge, England, reading Silence by Shusaku Endo. And I thought, but between the apostate priest in Endo's novel and the character in the David Ackles song, Chapel of Stone drops right in there and aspires at least to speak into those spaces.
In a chapel of stone, on a cross made of gold, that's where I'll find you, or so I'd been told. Often they'd sing me the stories of old, but the words seem so empty, and the tune seems so cold. I have carried your cause, I have pleaded your grace. Why are you hiding when I seek your face? I sought you by day, I sought you by night, I raided the eyes of the poor for a glimpse of your light. They cried, we are thirsty. I said you are blessed. I said you shall drink soon. They replied you're possessed. I looked at their hunger. I offered a crust. It was my face they spat in. It was your name they cursed. In a chapel of stone.
I want to encourage your listeners, if possible, to go to Kickstarter and check out what's available and see the little video that's on there, and decide for yourself if you want to support this. And that's what I really want. I want people to go like, yeah, wow, this is cool. I want to bring this to light, and it's worth $20 for me or whatever on Kickstarter. And I want people to hear this record. That's basically what I'm here for. So Kickstarter, Steve Scott double album. I think that's how it's billed.
And I think all that I would say on it is listening to it 50 years on, listening to the work I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the project. I'm grateful for all the hard work and the money that people poured into making it happen. And for that reason, I wanted to come out. I wanted to speak to where we are now and find people, find ears, find hearts that want to, listen and talk in 2025.
Thank you guys both for coming on Rock That Doesn't Roll, and
Thank you.
best of luck with the Kickstarter. I think it'll get fully funded pretty quick.
We'll see. We can be hopeful. Thank you, Andrew. It's very nice to have Steve and I here.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I can't charm me mantra cause I can't get in the lotus. I can't look inwards cause I lose me focus. I threw away me ticket to the astral plane. There was no guarantee I'd come back again. There's gotta be a better way. Don't you know we gotta find it today? What you say?
And as I mentioned, this is our season 3 finale. We will be taking a break from weekly episodes for a month or two, but in that time, we'll have some feed drops from other podcasts that we love and think you will love. And you can find them all right here in the Rock That Doesn't Roll feed. And of course, we'll have our 3rd annual Christmas special. So please send in your favorite CCM Christmas songs so we can include them. Leave us a message with whatever you want to say on our feedback hotline at 629-777-6336. You can also find us on Substack and Instagram by searching Rock That Doesn't Roll.
And of course, you should give us a rating and review on whatever podcast app you're using to listen right now. Rock That Doesn't Roll is an independent production supported by you, our listeners, and distributed by PRX.
Our original score is by Jim Cooper of Infomercial USA.
I'm Leah Payne, and the show's producer and co-host is the one and only Andrew Gill.
Remember, rock all you want, but watch it if you start to roll. Thanks so much for listening to this entire episode all the way to the end. Give yourself a pat on the back. And if you enjoy the show this much, consider becoming a Patreon member at patreon.com/RTDR. Thanks so much.
From PRX.